Hello and welcome to the EDH Academy podcast. My name is Jay and I will be your host as we explore Magic the Gathering's most popular format, the Commander format, also known as the EDH format. I thank you for joining me on episode 1 of a Tuesday bi-weekly podcast where we discuss a wide variety of topics pertaining to the Commander format. From deck strategies and how to counter them, upcoming sets and what the influx of cards are going to mean for the format, as well as any type of rule or ban list changes and what that's going to mean for you and your deck. But we're going to go a bit beyond that. Because when you play Commander, much like any other Magic format, there's a human element, there's a personal element that doesn't get a lot of attention, a lot of focus. And I hope to explore that within this podcast. Topics such as how do you financially afford to keep up in the Commander format? How do you handle player politics? And how to handle problem players in your playgroup. To start off this podcast, however, I would like to thank the people of Twitter who retweeted and responded to my poll that I had started last week. I had asked Twitter, what is an appropriate cost for a first EDH deck with color-appropriate staples? I wanted to get a feel from other players out there besides me of where they feel the financial barrier of entry into the format is. This information will help me better gear this podcast with an understanding of what it's taking players to enter the format as well as keep up in the format. In recent Commander news, it was formally announced which decks are going to be reprinted for the second Commander Anthology series. For those fans of such decks as Breed Lethality, Wade into Battle, Built from Scratch, and Devour for Power, you're in for quite the treat. From what the press release states, the legendary creatures are being reprinted in the new card template that was debuted in Dominaria. With MSRP starting at $165, it's about the same as buying all 4 decks individually, but considering that they've been out of print for quite some time, the prices for those decks are actually lower in buying the Anthology series versus trying to find them in a big box retailer or on eBay or from a third party. As you well know, this is the first episode of our podcast at the EDH Academy, and this first episode is really the first step of a journey into exploring the format and having discussions with you, my audience members, about this format. And everyone's unanimous first step into the format is, what is Commander? What exactly is it? What makes it different than other formats I've played in, whether I've drafted or played in Standard and Modern? What makes this different? Well, to start, Commander is actually best known for its deck building restriction. Each Commander deck has a legendary creature that acts as the general for the deck. They dictate the card selection you have available to you, as well as offer a way for you to synergize your deck around a central focal point. This legendary creature is actually not put into your main deck. It's actually placed in a spot on the field known as the command zone. Here you can actually cast your commander by paying its converted mana cost whenever you can cast a creature. Another special feature about the commander is that when it would leave play, either going back to your hand, shuffle into your library, be destroyed by battle, get exiled, be sacrificed, whatever it may be, you can actually return that creature to the command zone. A special condition, however, is that your commander costs 2 generic mana more for each time you cast it from the command zone. So for example, if I have a commander that costs 4 mana and I cast him from my command zone, should that commander be returned back to the command zone, whether he's bounced, exiled, whatever the reason may be, it will now cost 6 mana to cast it, then 8, then 10, etc. This is known as the commander tax, and it's tacked onto the quote-unquote end of your commander's casting cost. So if you have an effect that reduces the cost of a certain creature type or a certain spell color, those will reduce the total mana you have to spend. Earlier I had mentioned that your commander dictates what type of cards you can run within your deck, and I want to expand on that just a little bit. Your commander has what's called a color identity. What that color identity means is that if you look at your commander's converted mana cost and within its rule text, whatever mana symbols you can find within those 2 locations, those are the mana symbols that could appear in cards that you run in your deck. For example, if I'm running Geist of St. Traft, who's a commander that costs 1 white and blue, that means I can run colorless cards, white cards, and blue cards. When it comes to colorless cards, however, I have to make sure that if there are any mana symbols in the rules text, they are either white or blue. The last deck building constraint that Commander has is that your main deck has to be exactly 99 cards. So your main deck combined with your Commander have to total exactly 100 cards. A feature that is unique to Commander is that each player has an additional lose condition on top of either getting 10 poison counters, trying to draw from your deck and not being able to, or having your life reduced to 0 or lower. If a player takes 21 or more points of combat damage from any one commander, they lose regardless of their life total. This includes, very little known fact, this includes if your commander is taken from you and that creature swings and attacks you. If any player's commander deals 21 points of combat damage to a player, that player loses automatically. There's an entire genre of deck strategy built around this win condition. So that's a pretty neat way of being able to finish the game, considering that sometimes during the later part of the game, you've been playing for, upwards of 2-3 hours now, and you're trying to find a way to end the game. Well, commander damage is certainly the way to go about doing that. Now that we have a better understanding of the deck building constraints within the Commander format, one must ask, how does someone easily get into a format with such a wide range of cards available to you? Wizards of the Coast actually has you covered there. Since 2013, Wizards has been releasing Commander decks, pre-constructed decks of 100 cards that are ready to play out of the box, and the decks that are made are actually tuned to be played with the other decks within their given year. What makes the decks so unique is that it's not just 100 cards of one commander and a series of cards that get you to winning the game. Wizards of the Coast actually makes these decks with 3 different legendary creatures within that color identity, so that you could swap them out, see which one you like more, and once you settle on a commander that you really like, that is when the true journey begins, and you're starting to think creatively as to how this deck works, how you play the deck, what are things that you're running into that you wish you had more of, what cards are you drawing that you don't want to see or you find yourself not wanting at that point in time. Finding your commander is merely the first step in a wondrous journey into building a deck that you really love, that you enjoy playing, and that you get this real cathartic feeling of accomplishment and joy. What I think makes the Commander format so much different than any other constructed format is that you could tell 4 different people to build a Commander deck using the same commander, and it will all come out different. Even having access to the same pool of cards and the same color of cards, people weigh the needs and wants of that commander differently from one another. In decks like Standard and Modern, it's very easy to quote-unquote solve the format and determine which cards are great and to simply run multitudes of that card. But because Commander has that deck building restriction where you're only allowed 1 copy of each individual card, you start seeing some really unique decision making when it comes to filling in the spaces that would normally have multitudes of a very powerful card for the format. And I think that's what a lot of people like as well, that they can take an individual commander, have such a wide array of cards to choose from, a wide range of power level of cards to choose from, and make something that's truly their own without the restriction of thinking, oh, well, I can only do it with the last 2 years with the cards or with the last 10 years with the cards. They can now go forward and build the deck that they would want to build using cards back from when they first started or when from their older siblings had started. They can all do that, but yet somehow the format is naturally balanced to where a single deck isn't overpowering because they're running 4 of the top 8 cards within a particular color. If you're someone in a position where you have a large collection of cards, the start of your commander journey may actually be within your own home and your own collection. Find a legendary creature amongst that pile, see if you can pile 99 cards together consisting of basic lands, spells, and creatures, and see where the deck takes you. Maybe you end up liking the deck, maybe you at least know, hey, I don't like running this particular commander. I think because of how wide open the commander format can be, it's no real loss to go in and try something different and try something new. Because at the end of the day, If you don't like the deck, at least you've learned how the deck actually works. So that way when you do find your own deck and you find your own playstyle and use that knowledge of you having played that deck, so that way when you face up against it in the future, you know better. Now, if you're someone who is all about building from scratch, there are actually some resources that will help you out in determining what cards you actually want to run. Because there are a lot of people who participate in the format, certain cards have already been confirmed to be cards you're going to want to run in your deck. Especially considering how many cards there are out there, knowing what cards are going to be good for the format based on what other people have played, it's going to make your deck building process that much quicker and your deck that much more efficient. There are resources available to you that will help you build your deck so that way you're not trying to sort through thousands of cards to determine which ones are the best. If you haven't heard of it yet, there is a website called edhrec.com. That is such a valuable resource for deck building, especially because they collect data from the popular deck building websites deckstats.net and tappedout.com, where they take the decks that people are making under your commander and they pull them together to not only make them available to you, but they also give you an average deck of what that commander deck would look like. The website is such a useful tool for people who are looking to experiment with new commanders or new play styles. They may not know exactly what they need to do, and instead of attempting to experiment with cards that they believe would work but turn out that the cards they chose were not as efficient as they had previously thought. EDH Rec helps to bridge that experience gap with knowledge and allows players to be able to get a head start on the brutal process of learning what does and does not work in the Commander format. Another valuable tool to learning about the Commander format and how to build decks is to consume as much Commander content as possible. If you're on YouTube, watch videos about deck techs, watch videos about gameplay. If you're at work or you're on a long commute, listen to a podcast. Consume as much content as possible, because the more you listen to other people's ideas and other people's thoughts about the format, the more refined your opinion and your thought process about the format becomes. You start to learn things quicker and start to understand newer ideas quicker. And when new sets come out and new legendary creatures become available to you, you can start making connections of those commanders' presumed playstyles to ones you've already heard of, either through a podcast or through your own experience. And you're also able to determine what cards you feel are going to be good for the Commander format because of your knowledge of other cards within the format. Before I sign off, I'm going to be answering a few questions from our Q&A corner. If you have any questions about the format, you can find me at Twitter at EDH_Academy. Use the hashtag EDHAQNA, all letters, and you can possibly hear the answer to your question on air. The first question is, can you use Planeswalkers as your commander? The general rule of thumb is no, you cannot use Planeswalkers as your commander. In 2014, the commander products that was released, they were based around a Planeswalker as your commander. Those cards in particular have a line of text in the bottom of the card that says, this card can be used as your commander. Otherwise, for the commander format, they cannot be used. This is to not confuse you about the recently made Brawl format, where you can use any standard legal legendary creature or Planeswalker as your commander. Another common question about getting into Commander is, can I have more than one commander? Can I have two commanders? And the answer is yes and no. Normally, each player only has one commander. However, there is a mechanic currently present in the Commander format known as the partner mechanic. That was the main feature in the 2016 Commander products, where you would have two commanders with the mechanic that says partner at the bottom. If you were to have two partner commanders, you would only be able to have 98 cards in your main deck. So like I had mentioned earlier, the combined total of your main deck and your commander or commanders has to be exactly 100. Another very good question is, can I use cards with a hybridized mana symbol if one of the colors in that symbol are not part of my commander's color identity? There are some cards out there where they have two colors in the same circle. So they'll have the Sun of the Plains and the Teardrop of the Island with a bit of a slash in the middle of it to represent that you can pay either white mana or blue mana to satisfy that singular cost there. In Commander, the hybridized mana symbol is treated in such a way that both mana symbols have to be a part of your commander's color identity in order for you to be able to run it. That leads to an interesting follow-up question. What about the extort mechanic? The extort mechanic reads, when you cast a spell, you may pay hybridized black or white. If you do, each opponent loses 1 life, and you gain life equal to the life lost this way. The thing about the extort mechanic is that the only time that the hybridized mana appears in the rules text for extort is in the reminder text. Under the current rules of Commander, reminder text does not count towards that being of a mana symbol, so you can run extort cards that are white in a mono white deck without violating the rules. You could run black extort cards in mono black decks, and of course you can run white and black extort cards in a commander that has both black and white in its color identity. And that is going to do it for episode 1 of the EDH Academy podcast, where we discussed what the Commander format is, what the deck building constraints are, as well as how a player could actually get started in the format. I would like to thank @PlanesProject on Twitter for designing our amazing podcast logo and for being a positive influence to the EDH community. He makes deck tech videos on YouTube under the username The Planeswalker Project. Do check him out. He's a great guy. I would like to thank the users on Twitter who retweeted and voted in my poll. Your contribution and your input is greatly appreciated. Thank you for joining me for episode 1, and I will see you in 2 weeks.